Hello guys, welcome back to Controls Hero. Today I have a Johnson Controls CCT tutorial on hybrid activity. This is a very special container block that is based on states like off on, open close, off on control, etc. And this block is a must when you are creating PIDs. So what's this container block? Okay, we actually have two types in CCT. They're called activity and hybrid activity. Let me show you what I mean. See all these yellow boxes? Well, these are my container blocks. And so let's look at the first one, this guy, system run. I'm gonna right click, view logic. And if I make this big, okay, so you can see that here we have a logic diagram and it's only one screen. So this is a regular activity. If I go back to control, let's look at my supply fan start stop, right click, view. This is also a regular activity container block. So let me show you what's a hybrid activity. So let's go to my cooling PID. And notice that this container block has this blue state box with some options, off, on, and the state. So if I click on each state, you can see that the screen changes. So under off, my cooling PID is being commanded to 0. Under on, there's a PID. And under state, there's some other logic. Now let me show you another example. I'm gonna go back to control. And let's look at the supply fan BFD speed control. Right click, view logic. And you can tell right away there is a hybrid activity by looking at this little box with the blue state. But this one has 3 states, off, on, and control. And notice that every single state, it's a different piece of logic. So off, my fan is set to 0. On is set to minimum speed. Control, I guess it is being set to some set point. And the state. And notice that under my state screen, there's nothing connected to my supply fan output. And even if you try, you can't make any connection. See, connection is not allowed. And this is because in this screen, you put some logical conditions that tells the hybrid activity to which state it should be, either off, on, or control. Now, before we start creating our first hybrid activity, I want to show you one last example. So let's try to add an activity. I'm just going to click this plus sign. And you can see that CCT has a lot of pre-built activities. So some of them, you know, they're activities, regular activities, one screen, or multiple screen hybrid activities. So let's try to pick a hybrid activity. So let's look for damper minimum position. So I'm just gonna click the button right here to add one. I can give it a name or leave the name that it's in there and just go to finish. Then you can see that it was created here. I'm gonna right click and view logic. And you can tell right away that it's a hybrid activity, but this one has 5 states. So let's click on close. You can see that under close is being this damper is being commanded to a constant, which is 0. For open, I'm assuming that is gonna be commanded to 100. Yep, my constant is 100. For minimum, I guess I have some minimum position. I guess default is 5%. Now close, go back, under hold. So this is gonna hold it in 2 positions. So notice that this is a tricky thing. If I unhide this connection, you can notice that this output can actually be connected inside the logic. So that's for another tutorial. And control, under control we have a PID. And clicking back to my state, you notice that there's no connection to my output because this is meant to have the conditions to command my hybrid activity to either of these states. Now I want to show you how to create your first hybrid activity. So I'm just gonna go to output control. You can choose any of these columns. I'm gonna just do it here. So I'll click on this plus sign. And all these are activities, pre-built activities, but if you want a blank activity or hybrid activity, let's type activity. And you can tell that we can either pick an activity, one screen, or a hybrid activity. So we want a hybrid activity, and I'm just gonna name it hybrid activity. I just want one and then finish. So it's right here. I'm gonna right click on it and view logic. And here's our blank hybrid activity. So it's a little too close. I'm just gonna zoom out. I can move around. So, and if you notice, if you try to delete this block, you cannot really do it. So it won't let you, because it's, you know, it's a hybrid activity. And what I want to do for this example, I want to create a PID. So why a PID? Because PIDs are always active, and the only way that I found to be able to disable them is by having them in a hybrid activity. So let me just do this really quick. Just gonna add an output, float. And notice that I can't really connect my PID to my output, right? And that's because we're under the state condition. So we gotta go to either off or on. And you see that my PID disappears. So basically my PID shouldn't be under state. So I'm just gonna click on it and delete it. And I usually want my PID under the on state. So I'm just gonna go for that. So now it works. And for my off state, I want a constant, a float, which is a number of 0. So I'm just gonna double click on it. It already has a value of 0, but I like to name it 0, so I know that it has that number. There you go. Now let me go back to the on state. I really want to add my inputs, so I'm gonna go to input. And I just want my set point and my process variable. So my set point, both of them are float. So I'm just gonna name it set point. Easy enough. And for now, I'll make default set point, let's say 1 inch. And my process variable, I'm just gonna call it static. Or static pressure. And that's gonna go here. And I'm just gonna put some basic parameters in my PID. And by the way, if you want to learn a little bit more about PID tuning, I have a website. If you go to controlshero.com/PID, I have some instructions there. So soon I'm gonna be making a video, but not yet. But in the meantime, you can go to the website. There you go. And I'm gonna make my supply fan BFD output my default element. So I'm just gonna click right here, output. And if you're not sure what this is, I have a quick tutorial under my Instagram account. So just go to instagram.com/controlshero. So we have our basic PID done under the on condition. Under my off condition is gonna go to 0. And you can see that these inputs are not used under the off condition. So now what is left is the state. So here is where we tell the hybrid activity to go to either off or on. So let's do it very simple. So I'm just gonna connect my system enable. This, and I know that my system enable has the units of disable enable with a slash, not these ones. This. Gonna apply, close, and notice that my hybrid activity has the units of off on. If I right click on it, view details, you can tell that. I could change them if I want, but let's just try to connect my system enable to my hybrid activity. So it's not letting me, but it gives me the option to either change the units of my source or the destination, which is pretty nice. But we don't need this actually. So we want a translation. So actually I gotta go to my command. Let's do a command hierarchy here. And I'm just gonna do it quick. So I want to remove my second input. And I'm just gonna do a basic translation here. I'm gonna go to edit. And for my input, I do have disable, enable. And for my output, off, on, already there. So I can either apply, but well, not really. I gotta define my input to be, when it's disabled, I want it off. When it's enabled, I want it on. I'm gonna apply. So if you guys would like me to do a tutorial on command hierarchies, let me know, because they are very useful. So let's see if this works. So I did a little translation, so it works. Now let me make this pretty before we simulate. There you go. Now let's go ahead and simulate. So I'm just gonna click the simulate button, and I'm gonna make my speed, let's say 3 times the real time. And I want my system enable. Let's keep it disabled. And I'm gonna start simulation. Now you can see that my system enable is disabled, so the command hierarchy is selecting the off state. So we are under the state screen, so nothing happens here. It's only what you pick. So off, let's go to off, and you can see that my supply fan BFD is set to 0. That's what we want under the off condition. So now and the green green box tells you that that's the state that is selected. So let's simulate from within the hyperactivity. So I'm just gonna right click on my system enable, and let's do an enable command and do send enable, and it went right away to on. So if we go to on, you can see, yeah, that my PID is already going 44% because my set point is 1 inch and my static pressure is 0. So it's gonna go to 100 right away. And note this, if I click under my off state, you know that my off state we want 0, but check this out. See that we have 2 values separated by a comma. So the first value, it tells you that this state wants to command the VFD to 0, but it's actually commanding it to 100. So that's because our PID is 100. So now let's go back to my system enable. Let's disable the PID, and I go to disable. Actually, I'm gonna bring this over. Disable. Oh, gotta move this again. Send a disable command right away to off. So under my supply fan BFD, we want to go to 100, but the actual value is 0. So if we go back to off, you can tell that now the supply fan BFD speed is getting a 0. But something very important to note, under my off state, I don't have a PID. So that kind of means that my PID is disabled. So because there's no PID, so if I go to on, my PID is in there, but it's not active. So let's try this again. So let's go and command my system enable to enable and see what's gonna happen. So I'm gonna click send, goes to enable right away. And you can see that, well, this is kind of lags. Now my PID is starting again from 0 all the way to 100. That's how you can tell that it was disabled. And this is basically how a hyperactivity works. Now I want to show you one last trick that you can do. But before we do that, I gotta ask you guys, if you think this is a good video, please like it and subscribe if you haven't done so. Okay, so I already exit simulation. So let's try to change the units of my hyperactivity state. So I'm just gonna right click on it. I'm gonna go to view, details, and I want to change that to a 3-state unit. Let's do off, on, and hold. And it's gonna alert me that we're gonna lose a connection because we're changing the unit. So I'm just say okay. I'll close it. And notice that we have our third state. But if I go back to my state window, you can see that we lost our connection from our command hierarchy to the state. And you know, it won't let me connect it. So I could do this. So I can double click my command hierarchy and change my units, let's say to off, on, hold, my output units. But if I apply, see what's gonna happen. I can actually make the connection, but since my system enable is at 2 units input, you know, there's no way to command the PID to hold unless, you know, I can pick the hold, but then we cannot command it to on. So basically this is not gonna work. So let's do something different. So for simplicity, I'm just gonna delete my command hierarchy. Yes. And I'm gonna try to connect my system and enable straight to the state. And in this case, you know, we're gonna use this little feature that is asking me if I want to change the source or the destination so the units match. So let's say I want to change my source because I want to keep my off, on, hold. So let's change the source, which is my system enable, and you see the connection got made. So now my system enable is at 3-state point, off, on, and hold. So this should work. Now here's the trick that I want to show you. You know that we have off, we have on our PID, and hold, we have nothing. We can add a value or something, but I want to leave this not connected, disconnected on purpose. So I can show you this little trick. Now let's go ahead and simulate. I want to save the changes, and I want to do 1x speed, so real time. I'm going to start my simulation. Now let's go to my state. So here, let's see, let's wait. Okay, so we're under off. Off, my supply fan has a 0. So let's change that to on. So I'm just gonna simulate this. You know, I want to command this to on. Oops, gotta keep moving this window. So I'm gonna send an on command. And I chose one speed, 1x speed, so the PID is slower, so I can show you my point. You can see that the PID got enabled and is going up. So, and as it goes up, I want to command this to, let's say, to hold. Send. And you can see that we are under the hold state. Let's see what's gonna happen. So you can't really tell what value it has. So the way to do it, I guess I gotta get out of the logic, and that's why I picked this as my default element. That, you know, is highlighted in black, so I can see its value in the activity. So you can see that it stopped at 44.8% because nothing is commanded. It's on hold, but basically nothing is commanded to it. So when you are at that state, it will just keep the last value. So that was the last value from the PID. So if we command our system enable to off, you know that this is gonna go to 0. But what happens if I command it back to on, where our PID is? So let's try that. I'm gonna go back to on. Let's see. I'm gonna send the on command, and you actually went to 0. But you can see that the PID started from 0. All the way to 100. Now, what if we want to start our PID not from 0, but from its last position? So we can do this. Here's the trick. I'm gonna exit simulation, and I'm gonna show you a really cool trick. So I'm just gonna go inside the logic, and I'm gonna go back to my on, and let's say that we want to start PID at the value where it left at the hold position. So let's do this. I'm gonna double click on my PID, and you can see that we have a startup value. So you can put a startup value, you know, when the PID first enable, it can start at a specific value. But we actually want to expose that input. So I'm just gonna right click, expose ports for connection, and I'll look for that startup value, click OK, and you can see that is right here. So here's the trick. I'm gonna click on my output at the very end, click on it, and I'm gonna connect it back to startup, just like that. And what is going to happen when the state is commanded from on to hold, let's say my PID will be at 50%. So when it's commanded to hold, since there's nothing commanding the output will remain at 50%. But when we command the state back to on, since it will be at 50%, this is gonna feed back into the PID that 50% to the startup value. So it's actually gonna start at 50 or whatever number it was, right? So let's give it a try. Let's simulate this. And I'm gonna go back to control. And let's give the system enable an on command. On. And then let's send the command. You'll see that the PID is gonna start soon. 14.7%. 29. So it's gonna keep on going up. So let's stop it. So let's send a command or hold it. Let's send a hold command. You can see you got hold at 44.6. So now let's do the trick. So let's go back to on command. So this is gonna re-enable the PID. And it should start from where it left. So let's send a command. So it's not gonna go any down. So you'll see, just up. See, 59.4. So it's actually doing the trick, you know. And if we command it back to off, it should go to 0. Let's see, off, 0. And this is it. This is the end of this video tutorial. In summary, hyperactivities lets you have multiple screens, whereas regular activities are just one screen. And you can do a lot with just one screen. But the two key things that I found very useful on hyperactivities is the fact that you can enable and disable a PID, and that you can hold a value that is constantly changing. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you haven't done so, please like it, comment below, and share it with your controls friends. Thank you very much.